This week's episode is going to be very flavorful with all the flavors of Ubuntu 24.04. Proton 9.0 was released this week to make gaming on Linux even better. Then NVIDIA is back on the show with some more positive news, this time about supporting GeForce Now on the Steam Deck. All of this and so much more coming up on This Week in Linux, your source for Linux good news. This episode of TWIL is sponsored by Kolide. More on them later. Last week we talked about Ubuntu 24.04 LTS, but we didn't really have time to talk about the flavors, so we're going to do that now. So the Ubuntu flavors of 24.04 LTS include a lot. I think there's like 10 of them. So we're not able to cover them in super detail, but we will be covering with as much as possible. So we have Kubuntu, Lubuntu, Xubuntu, Ubuntu Mate, Ubuntu Budgie, Ubuntu Unity, and more and more and more. So there's probably a distro that will tickle your taste buds. So let's explore the delicious details of each flavor before you take a bite. Digitally speaking, of course. So they all share a lot of things with the main system of Ubuntu 24.04, such as the Linux kernel 6.8, Mesa 24 graphics stack, Systemd 255.4, GCC 14, and LLVM 18. And there's also an LTS support for all of these, though it's different from the Ubuntu one, because the Ubuntu one is 5 years and the flavors get 3 years of support. Now, most of the flavors are using Ubuntu's Flutter-based installer, but Kubuntu, Lubuntu, and Ubuntu Unity have opted to use the Calamares installer instead. Both of these installers are solid, so it's likely going to be a good experience regardless which flavor you try. So let's get started with the flavors, and we have Kubuntu 24.04 LTS to start with, and that is because it does not come with KDE Plasma 6. It comes with KDE Plasma 5.27.11. Now, this is interesting because some people are going to be disappointed by this because it doesn't have the latest and greatest Plasma desktop, but it's also important to note that this is an LTS, and this is something that they only had maybe 2 months to test Plasma 6 to get it ready to go for an LTS. And if you're going to support something for that long, and a lot of people are expecting to be as solid as possible for the LTS, it makes a lot of sense that they chose to stick with the Plasma 5 version instead, because there's been a ton of testing and work on that versus the Plasma 6. So as a person who wants to use Plasma 6, I get why others wouldn't want to use this kind of thing, but I still think this is the best choice for Kubuntu because they're going for the day-to-day user, and people who are that kind of are typically not really caring about what version of the desktop environment they're using, and they just want to have a good experience, and this is probably the best way. But in a few months, they're going to be releasing Plasma 6 in 24.10, so it's not that big of a wait anyway, and they might backport it to 24.04. We'll have to wait and see for that. But I think this is a good idea for Ubuntu to do so. Next up is Ubuntu Studio, and that's because it's also a KDE Plasma desktop, and that's using the same one that is in Kubuntu. But there are some interesting things that are changing in Ubuntu Studio, and that being Pipewire. Pipewire 1.0.4 is the standard now, which is really interesting because they're saying that they recommend Pipewire usage for both professional, prosumers, and everyday audio needs, which is a big deal. And they're even saying that if you still want to use Jack, you have the option for Jack 2 to be able to use like an on-the-fly switcher. But they're also talking about how some people who are developers of Jack are saying that Pipewire is kind of like Jack 3, which is a very big deal. So it's really cool that they're saying that we're seeing that adoption in these kinds of distributions, because for those who don't know, Ubuntu Studio is for people who are content creators and musicians and stuff like that, because it's like putting in as low latency as possible. And with Pipewire being at that stage for them to do it, that is a really good sign. The next flavor is Lubuntu. Lubuntu 24.04 LTS. It comes with the LXQt or LXQt 1.4 desktop environment. It has a new installer prompt. It looks really nice. There's a new snap monitor tool. There's also a configuration editor for the SDDM login screen. There's also a Lubuntu update checker now, and they've also added a feature for Redshift Qt, which is able to reduce the blue light on your monitors. Ubuntu Unity 24.04 comes with a Unity desktop of 7.7. It's the first LTS of the Ubuntu Unity flavor, and it's also got a preview of the Ubuntu Lumiri stuff from the UbiPorts team. So that is very interesting. And I actually miss Unity. I think it's a very good desktop environment. If you've never tried it, go give it a shot. And also let me know what you think in the comments if you do. Ubuntu Cinnamon is next, and they have the Cinnamon 6.04 desktop environment. For those who are not familiar, Linux Mint is the project that makes the Cinnamon desktop, but also this is a different approach to it because Linux Mint is very different from Ubuntu. And this is more of like just having standard Ubuntu with Cinnamon on top, as I like to refer to it as Cinnabuntu, but they don't call it that. So 6.0.4 comes with all the features from the Linux Mint 21.3 release. And this is the first LTS release of Ubuntu Cinnamon. So that is really cool because that means that you're going to get some long-term support with the 3 years. Ubuntu Budgie is next, and this comes with Budgie 10.9.1 desktop. It has updates to the Welcome app, and there's a variety of new and improved applets like the Clockworks and the Weather applets. Ubuntu 24.04 LTS has XFCE 4.18 desktop environment, which surprising no one because it's been 4.18 for quite a while. Ubuntu's Snap-based App Center is included, but also included is the GDebi package installer, which is really nice because there are some reports that the App Center does not support downloading debs and installing them directly like that. And that's what GW is made for. So I like the fact that they are including it. And I would recommend that Ubuntu and other flavors who are using the App Center to do that as well, because for those who want to have downloads of debs and install them, that's the easiest way, the best solution in my opinion, for like the quickest way to get it done. There's also a new Snap-based firmware updater. They've pre-installed Thunderbird Snap and the LibreOffice 24.2 series. Ubuntu Kylin or Ubuntu Chillin, not sure, it has some small tweaks to their custom Windows 7-esque UK UI desktop. Edge Ubuntu 24.04 comes with GNOME 46. It also has the first version to have the minimal install option, and there's two new meta packages available in the Edge Ubuntu installer, and it also adds Gradebook to its default software set, which is an app for students to keep the track of their grades. Ubuntu Mate 24.04 LTS is dropping its Welcome tool, and they're also replacing the Software Boutique with Ubuntu's Flutter-based App Center, which is really interesting because Ubuntu Mate has been known for a long time related to the Software Boutique. So it's really interesting to see them do that. Also, the GNOME firmware is being used instead of the Flutter-based firmware updater tool. And there's just a lot of other stuff that's happening in all the different flavors. There's too many things to cover. So I covered like the biggest things from each one. And if you'd like to learn more about them, I'll have links in the show notes. And also let me know in the comments which flavor of Ubuntu you think is more delicious. Valve and CodeWeavers have announced the availability of Proton 9.0. For those unfamiliar, the Windows compatibility layer of Proton is awesome. It basically makes it possible to run games that are made for Windows to be running them on the desktop Linux and also on the Steam Deck. Basically building on top of the existing Wine project with Wine 9.0, and then they also pull in DXVK and VKD3D Proton along with other changes. Now, Proton 9.0 enables 15 more Windows games to work with Proton that previously only worked with Proton Experimental, such as Lord of the Rings Gollum, The Finals, Sonic Colors Ultimate, Dinogen Online, and many more. Proton 9.0 also brings changes that make more games playable on high core count CPUs that previously had issues, enabled NVAPI support or NVAPI support by default for most games, updated the VKD3D Proton in DXVK and DXVK NVAPI versions, added Steamworks SDK 1.59 support, and many various game-specific fixes. While we're on the subject of Proton, go check out the video I just released about Riot Games and how they could use Proton to offer Linux support for their game League of Legends instead of their current tragic logic as to why they won't. NVIDIA is back in the news this week with some more surprisingly good news. It feels kind of weird to talk about NVIDIA without being mad at them all the time. And it's a nice feeling though, and hopefully this keeps happening so I can get used to it. NVIDIA are officially making it easier to get their cloud gaming service GeForce Now on the Steam Deck. This is a good sign from NVIDIA and also further proof of the impact that the Steam Deck is having on the market. And it was already possible to do this before, but it was kind of a chore to do. And now NVIDIA is releasing the install option for doing it, which is really cool. So they released a new blog post where they have introduced the beta version of an install option for the Steam Deck. They say that this will automatically configure GeForce Now's browser in Steam Deck's gaming mode. And this does it by installing Google Chrome if it isn't already installed, and sorts out all the settings you need for it to work, like Flatpak settings for gamepad use, and adds a GeForce Now shortcut to Steam, as well as a few more things. So good job yet again to NVIDIA. Man, that's weird to say, but I'm glad to say it. So good job, NVIDIA. This episode is sponsored by Kolide. What do you call an endpoint security product that works perfectly and makes users miserable? A failure. The old approach to endpoint security is to lock down employer devices and roll out changes through forced restarts. But it just doesn't work. The IT department is miserable because they've got a mountain of support tickets. Employees start using personal devices just to get their work done, and executives opt out the first time it makes them late for a meeting. You can't have a successful security implementation unless you work with end users. That's where Kolide comes in. The user-first device trust solution notifies users as soon as it detects an issue on their device, and it teaches them how to solve it without needing help from IT. That way, untrusted devices are blocked from authenticating, but users don't stay blocked. Kolide is designed for companies with Okta, and it works on Linux, macOS, and Windows, as well as mobile devices. So if you have Okta and you're looking for a device trust solution that respects your team, visit thisweekinlinux.com/Kolide to watch a demo and see how it works. That's thisweekinlinux.com/Kolide, Kolide. Have you heard of the game Golf with Your Friends? I've been playing this game for a long time, but I actually haven't played it in a while. I even used to stream this game on my channel, but it's been a while since I last played it. But with the news this week, though, I think they may have pulled me back in, because they've introduced a new mode, and it's called Speed Golf. The idea here is to forget about how golf works. Who cares about par and the number of shots you take? It's all about how fast you are. It's a furious race to get your ball into the hole before everyone else and score points based on how quickly you can do it. And to help things go even faster, they've set up a new handbrake feature so you can slow the ball down whenever you need to get a new shot in. So, and they also have these like speed gates to give you a boost as you go around corners and stuff like that. Very cool. This sounds like a lot of fun, so I need to give this a shot soon, and maybe I'll even stream it. Who knows? If you're interested, well, the timing couldn't be better also, because Team 17 is doing a humble bundle right now that includes Golf with Your Friends, so you'll find a link to that in the show notes. A new version of EndeavourOS has been released with EndeavourOS Gemini. So EndeavourOS is an Arch Linux-based distribution for those who are not familiar. It has a lot of cool customizations, but it is also very close to Arch, which is a really cool thing to be. So it's customized, but also very Arch-like. And the core components have been updated to be powered by the Linux kernel 6.8, Mesa drivers 24.0, the graphics stack, and it also has KDE Plasma 6 desktop environment on both the live environment and the offline installation option. This uses X11 for the live environment for compatibility's sake, but when you install it, it gives you the Wayland by default. But of course, as a user, you can choose between Wayland and X11, whichever one works for you. Now, they've also switched from the NVIDIA DKMS driver to the proprietary NVIDIA graphics drivers to prevent freezing issues with the live environment when NVIDIA boot is selected. Also, there's updates to the Welcome Updater, as well as adds the gparted partition editor to the live ISO and many more. There is a little bit of a bummer. They had to remove the ARM version of the distro because of not having the maintenance ability, to not having enough people to work on it. So that's a bummer. But EndeavourOS is a very cool distribution. And if you'd like to try a customized Arch-based distro that sticks very close to Arch, then I think you should check it out. Just when Microsoft decided to add sudo to Windows after just over 40 years of the concept existing, systemd's lead developer, Lennart Pottering, posted on Mastodon some news about a new effort in the systemd project, and that is run 0, which is a sudo-like command and basically a sudo alternative. In the post, Lennart talks about the weaknesses of sudo and how it has a large possible attack surface. For example, he says that sudo supports network access, LDAP or LDAP configurations, other types of plugins, and much more. But most importantly, he says that the SUID binary provides a large attack surface. So to quote Lennart from his post, he says, there's a new tool in systemd called run 0. Or actually, it's not a new tool. It's actually the long existing tool systemd-run. But when invoked under run 0 name, like via a symleak, it behaves a lot like a sudo clone, but with one key difference. It's not, in fact, suid. Instead, it just asks the service manager to invoke a command or shell under the target user's UID. It allocates a new PTY for that and then shovels data back and forth from the originating TTY and this PTY. Or in other words, the target command is invoked in an isolated exec context, freshly forked off PID1 without inheriting any context from the client. He goes on to say that one could say 1.0 is closer to behavior of SSH than to sudo in many ways. He says the tool is also a lot more fun to use than sudo. For example, by default, it will tint your terminal background in a reddish tone while you're operating with elevated privileges. That is supposed to act as a friendly reminder that you haven't given up the privileges yet and marks the output of all commands that ran with privileges appropriately. End quote. Now, I know there are going to be a lot of detractors for this simply because it's from systemd, but I'm very curious for anyone out there more informed on this topic than me to please leave a comment and let me know your thoughts. There is a new release of the beloved text editor Nano with Nano 8.0. Nano 8.0 provides access to 14 levels of grayscale in Xterm, up from the previous 4, and it also introduces a new modern bindings command line option. So it's -- modern bindings. So that makes key binding sequences for more commonly used commands, such as Control Q for quit, Control X for cut, Control C for copy, Control V for paste, Control Z for undo, and Control O for open a file, and many, many more. I was curious, based on this being called modern key bindings, the origin of Control C and when it started. And it dates back to the 1980s, with the first appearance believed to be in Apple's Lisa computer in 1983. So not exactly modern, but it's still a good update to have. So you can check the links in the show notes. The LibreELEC development team has announced the release of LibreELEC 12. This is a major update for this distro, and for those unfamiliar, LibreELEC is a great option for those looking to build a home theater PC, since it's made as an appliance distro for the Kodi Entertainment Center. This comes with Linux kernel 6.6.28, Kodi 21, and it also has changed many devices to 64-bit architectures, including the Raspberry Pi 4 and 5. And of course, with Kodi 21, this brings support for FFmpeg 6.0, NFS version 4 support for reading and writing M3U8 playlists, as well as AVIF image support, and many, many more. If you'd like to learn more about what's new with the latest version of Kodi, you can check out episode 259 of TWIL, where I go into more details there. Now, there are some notes for people who are upgrading. If you're using Widevine DRM, which is required for copy-protected video, like Prime Video and Netflix and that sort of stuff, if you're using on one of these devices, updating from LibreELEC 11, Widevine DRM will need to be reinstalled on those devices due to the changed architecture. Also, with LibreELEC 11, you can manually update, which you won't be able to automatically update. But if you're using LibreELEC 10 or older, you need to make a clean install because the updates won't work. I've used LibreELEC on many occasions, and it is fantastic. If you want to set up your own home theater PC, put it on a Pi, you have access to Kodi in a very nice experience. It kind of feels like you're building your own home theater. It's pretty cool. So check it out. Links in the show notes. Amarok is a music player from KDE, and they have just released a brand new version this week with Amarok 3.0. The last time I covered Amarok on TWIL was TWIL 23. Yep, 23. Not 123 or 223, but 23. Amarok 3.0 as the first major release in 6 years. And Amarok 3.0 is using Qt 5 and KDE Frameworks 5, but the developers hope to begin porting to Qt 6 and KF6 in the coming months. It's nice seeing Amarok come back to life because it's been dormant for quite a while. And I know some people who are big fans of Amarok, so this will be great news for them. Amarok has been around since 2003, so it has a lot of legacy code to deal with, but it is very cool that they're back, and they did manage to beat GIMP to 3.0, so there's that at least. Hopefully the port to Qt 6 and KF6 will be faster than previous versions. Just a quick announcement, there's not going to be a new episode next week because I will be traveling the entire week for the Red Hat Summit, so there's going to be a lot of content in general, but there's not going to be a new episode next week, so I'll see you 2 weeks from now for TWIL, but be sure to subscribe to Destination Linux because there's a new episode coming out tomorrow for that, as well as we're going to be recording a lot of stuff, interviews, and variety of different things at the Red Hat Summit. So be sure to subscribe to destinationlinux.net to get more content. And of course, I'll see you in 2 weeks for another episode of TWIL. Thanks for watching this episode of This Week in Linux. If you like what I do here on this show and want to be kept up to date with what's going on in the Linux and open source world, then be sure to subscribe. And of course, remember to like that smash button. If you'd like to support the show and the Tux Digital Network, then consider becoming a patron by going to tuxdigital.com/membership, where you can get a bunch of cool perks like access to patron-only sections of our Discord server and much, much more. You can also support the show by ordering the Linux is Everywhere t-shirt or the This Week in Linux shirt at tuxdigital.com/store, which is a brand new store. If you haven't checked it out, there's a lot of cool stuff. We even have a new retro vibes style Destination Linux collection. So go there to check it out, tuxdigital.com/store. Plus, while you're there, we have a bunch of other stuff like hats, mugs, hoodies, and more, tuxdigital.com/store. I'll see you next time for another episode of your source for Linux news. Thanks again for watching. I'm Michael Tennell. Hope you're doing swell. Be sure to ring that notification bell. And until next time, I bid you farewell.